Hey, this is Gary.
This is Mike.
And Daniel. We're not professionals. We're just three addicts sharing our experiences, strength, and hope regarding recovery.
Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other addicts and to practice these principles in our lives.
Welcome to another episode of the 12th Step Podcast. I'm Mike.
And I'm Gary.
And this is Daniel.
Good to be back. Absolutely good to be back.
It's always good to be back.
Yeah. Tonight, we're actually going to address a handful of emails that we had received from listeners that we did not get a chance to address last time we gathered, but there's been some addition as well. So I'm just going to read this. This is a fantastic email, and I think we all appreciate every listener that connects with us, writes in,
Absolutely.
emails us.
Yes.
Just love the feedback, so thank you so much. Hello, fellow addicts. I came back to SAA in August 2022 after another bottom, and what do you know? It worked. Another roaring thank you. It worked. SAA was great to me. That's fantastic. Congratulations to you that it worked, and it kept working. It's the last thing I tried and the first thing that worked. While the fellowship has been vitally important, actually doing the steps has been what has actually changed me, and by change I mean all. Losing the obsession for addictive sexual behavior, beginning to clear the wreckage of my past, and the noticeable reduction and elimination of some of my character defects. It's been a miracle. Yes, it has. It has been a miracle, and I think in all of our lives. I'm ready to begin my 9th step amends, and while I'm eager to feel the benefits of mending my personal relationships, I apologize. I just lost my place. I'm ready to begin my 9th step amends, and while I'm eager to feel the benefits of mending my personal relationships and beginning to make up for my mistakes, I'm scared. And I think that's a very natural response.
Yes, absolutely.
I need to make sure I do the most important one as well as I possibly can. My first amends is to my wife, whom I hurt very deeply with my acting out. Dishonesty, deception, and double life. I put her in physical harm for disease as well as in inflicting immeasurable emotional damage. I'm reaching to you for your advice and counsel. What did you do? Here's the questions from our listener, who signs as J. I'm reaching to you for your advice and counsel. What did you do to make amends with the most important person in your life? What mistake did you make? What worked? I'm grateful for your thoughts. So, a couple of really powerful questions.
Yeah.
Really powerful. Thought-provoking.
I want to take just a quick second and address some of the things that I thought about as he was building up to that.
Sure.
The first thing is that he said that he came back to SAA in August.
Yes.
After another bottom. And I think that's just a really good time to remind each of us that as an addict in recovery, you always have a relapse in you.
You may not necessarily
have a recovery.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think there's a couple things around that. I noticed in my latest relapse how we sort of hit this place of wallow. It starts off maybe one day and then thinks, screw it, it's all lost. I don't care. And it ends up being days of just self-pity and wallow and everything else, feeling all like everything is lost. I think the sign of true recovery is how quickly we get back on the horse.
Yeah.
It's one thing to fall off. It's a whole other thing to get back on. And I think a demonstration of good, healthy habits and recovery that's taking root in a person is when they fall down and then they get back up and say, look, I made a mistake, and I need to get moving forward again.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big piece of it.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to quickly point that out.
I think that's a great point.
So as we get into the 9th step in the making amends process, I think this might sound a little bit redundant, but the very best thing you can do for step 9 is to do really, really good work on step 8.
Right.
Okay. And make sure you understand your whys when you're going to approach whomever it is you're going to make amends to. Understand what your motivation is and what it is that you're hoping to accomplish. And remember that you need to take the other person into a lot of consideration because you don't want to cause any further harm.
Right.
And that's not just harm to the other person. You also need to consider maybe harm that what might be healthy for you, but also for some of the key relationships in your life.
Correct.
You can do harm there too. So assuming that we've done that, The next thing that pops into my head is that also keep in mind that there's going to be step 10. And step 10 is a continuing
Correct.
that process. So you got to mentally
When
and
we make a mistake, we promptly admit it.
exactly correct. Yeah. So, and I would also say that when you discover or rediscover a mistake that you made, that you promptly admit it and correct it.
Right.
So there's a little bit of an ongoing kind of a thing with your step 9. I mean, you want to do a really, really good job of it, but I've noticed in my own recovery work that my wife and I would have really, really good discussions, and we'd talk through a lot of things. And then as we would continue to do work, other things would come up that maybe we didn't notice before, or something would jog a memory. And, there was no intent of keeping anything secret, but it was like, oh, there's some work here that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Or you might not. There's also a little bit of, and this, I think this happens more often in your relationships that are ongoing, as opposed to maybe, I think some step 9 work can be kind of a one and done thing. You talk to somebody and maybe you just needed to go back and set some things right. And it's not like they're going to be in your life, but you needed to do some things.
Yeah.
So you do a good job of that. But you always got to be willing to do more if
There's more to be done.
if there's more to be done.
Yeah. I'm going to toss something in here as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know that step 9 focuses largely on those that have lived in the wake of our damage and destruction. I understand that. But one of those people that I think that needs to be listed in that is us.
Sure.
And I love the fact, I know that Jay is reaching out here saying, I want to talk about what I can do to help make amends to my wife. But I want to take credit where credit is absolutely due here for Jay. And that is that some of the damage, a lot of the damage has been to him personally. And he has done some things. He's recognized that SAA can help him. He's recognized that the steps are useful in his life. He's recognized and has joined groups and has been participatory in that, recognizing all those things that are helping him as he moves forward. And so there is something to be said about that. I don't want to just gloss over that and say, guess what, Jay? Now let's talk just about your wife. But the fact of the matter is that he's doing the things he needs to do for himself, and there needs to be some selfishness associated with that. That is that, hey, look, if there's no recovery for me, there is no us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and recognizing that just himself, focusing on himself and doing the very best he can do, can be, to some extent, one of the best things he can do for his wife. So, just wanted to point that out. What mistakes did you make, and what worked?
Okay. I didn't make any mistakes.
Right.
Do you know what? I'll be honest. When I started my amends process, I think I think one of the mistakes that I made when I first began, or I began to set out, and my sponsor helped me through this, as did my counselor. I really wanted to start the process with an idea that I was 100% responsible for 50% of the situation.
Sure.
And maybe on the surface that seems like it makes sense, but that attitude is just not right. It's unhealthy.
Yeah.
I'm still wanting to minimize what I'm doing by pointing fingers at somebody else.
Correct.
And that's just wrong. It's got to be about what you've done. Yes, the other person has to own 100% of what they're bringing to the table, but that's not why we're here. That's
Right.
not what we're doing. We're talking about what I've brought to the table, and that I'm 100% responsible for it.
Yeah.
In this particular instance, it was, I would blame the other person. Well, they did this and this, and they encouraged me, and they did this kind of a thing, and it's like, no, I facilitated that. I made myself available. I took advantage of situations. I had to focus on whatever amend process you're doing. Make sure you're focusing on the things that you did and take responsibility for them.
Correct.
So it's not I'm 100% responsible for 50% of what happened. It's I'm 100% responsible for everything that I brought to the table, and
Yeah.
that's what I'm here to deal with.
Right. I think that's a good point. Daniel, any thoughts from you? What major mistakes did you make? Or what worked?
I mean, a lot. I haven't reached this point where I'm doing my amends yet. I'm working through 6 and 7 myself, but I'm looking forward to this point.
Right.
Gary's been a great example of how to do that and moving forward. But I'm hoping to avoid those pitfalls and those mistakes. And the best way to do that is to, talk to others that have come before you, because, as our therapist has continued to remind us, our best thinking got us where we're at. So
Sure.
if I try to repeat what I believe is the best way to say I'm sorry and make amends, I'm probably going to botch it up.
Sure.
So it's best to go to someone else and say, okay, this is what I'm thinking. Am I going in the right direction, or do I need a course correction or need some assistance? And more than likely, it's going to be I'm going to need some assistance.
I'm going to just throw something out there. I'm going to tell you right now, Jay, I don't care what you do. There's going to be a mistake made in there. Right?
Yeah,
there's
most likely.
There's just no perfect way of doing this. There just simply isn't, right? And so I think you put your best foot forward and do the very best you can.
Yeah.
And then when you realize that it wasn't enough, maybe you do a little bit more. You do as much as you possibly can. Now, I'm going to tell you that I've been at this for a long time. I've been at this now almost, in fact, 7 years this month. 7 years this month I started down my path of recovery, reaching out to my counselor and moving forward. And one of the things I noticed is that I'm a different human than I was 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't... and what I mean by that is that there was no space in a room for my wife to feel and share her pain. And so when we'd start down that path of, hey, this is what happened to me, this is what occurred, and I was hurt by this or whatever the case may be, I didn't allow for any conversation around that. Now, 7 years later, so I guess my point to Jay is some of this stuff is going to take some time.
Yeah.
And so just literally sitting with your wife in her pain, recognizing you have a responsibility and some fault in her experiencing that pain, but there's no effort to correct it, no effort to shut it down, no effort to reword it, none of those things. She has a right to say, this was my experience and all of that.
Yeah.
And it hurt, and you hurt me in this way. And to be able to sit with her and to share with her and to allow her the space to be able to feel her emotions could very well be the most powerful thing, Jay, that you can do for her.
I agree.
And for everyone else in the way, and your children, if there are children in this, and that's the situation that I'm in with my own.
Now,
Go ahead.
no, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just my point being is that will do more in my estimation for letting her know that you're on the path of recovery by allowing her to feel her pain, to experience her emotions without us trying to recharacterize them, restate them. Just sit with her. Just sit with her and let her express that, because addiction doesn't allow that to happen.
Right. I have a couple of thoughts. The first one is that also accept that you're going to sit down and you're going to make amends and you're going to make some apologies and you're going to commit to doing things or stopping to do other things or whatever. But it's not a one and done kind of a thing, because they're going to sit and they're going to think about that and they're going to process it, and you're going to give them some new information, and then it's going to take some time for them to either sort out their feelings and then express those to them. So don't think that once you've had a conversation that the process is over.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to leave that open for whatever is going to come next.
Right.
And sometimes it's sometimes it's a clarification. Sometimes sometimes it'll bring up other things that need to be, talked about or worked out or resolved. My wife and I had many, many, many conversations.
Yeah.
In fact, 10 years into this, every now and then we have another one, particularly.
They do get further and further apart.
They do get further and further apart, and the nature of them changes a great
Correct.
deal. Sometimes it's just a little bit of reassurance because they're having a little bit of a trauma echo.
Right.
And it's just, and that usually just takes a no, this is, just a little bit of reassurance. And
Right.
if you're open and honest and you make that the culture, that'll do. The other thing that I'm thinking of is that the narcissistic tendencies that we carry, that addicts carry, when somebody expresses to you the pain and the hurt that you caused, we immediately think it's about us,
Correct.
and like this person is attacking me. And it is really hard to get your head around this, but it's not about you.
No, it's about their feelings and their emotions.
It's about them. So you have
there's a great little video, that whole thing with the nail and that
the
person.
nail in the head.
Oh.
yeah.
Nail
It's
in-
not about
it's
the nail.
not about the nail.
It's not about, go look
YouTube
that up on
that.
YouTube.
That's YouTube.
Yes.
It's
That's
not about the
worthwhile.
nail.
It's not about the nail. Very much worthwhile.
So my point is that they're giving you a gift because they're making themselves vulnerable and pointing out where they're hurting.
Right.
Okay. And sometimes they want help with that. And sometimes they just want you to listen to that. But what they don't want is for you to make it about you or
Yep.
make them like no, they're offering you a gift. You've pushed them in the mud.
Yes.
And now they're showing you where they're dirty to give you the opportunity to help clean it. It's not about, you're so terrible because you did. That's not what's going on.
Right.
But they may not be as good at expressing that as they will be as they get some practice. So it might feel like an attack. It might even look like an attack, but it's not.
It may actually be an attack.
Yeah,
early
yeah.
on.
Actually,
Very
in the
early on.
beginning, it could be,
Right.
because maybe that's all they know. But you have to, and it's going to sound weird, but you have to remove yourself from that just a little bit and listen to them like they're talking about somebody else for a minute.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Makes complete sense.
I mean, one other thing I would also suggest is when you're doing your amends is don't look at it as a checklist. Some of these people may go quickly. Others may take quite a while because they're not ready. And so it's not going to be, I got 1 through 100 and I can just go one at a time down this list, because some of them you may not even know how to contact. You may not know where they're at. They may not even want to talk to you.
Right.
And you have to wait till that's acceptable, or they may never want to. I know a couple times you've talked about it, that there are a few that it's not even been safe for you to step into that arena to talk to them.
Sure.
And so you've had to come up with a different way to do so.
I think that's relevant. I remember very early on looking at some of the step work and hearing some of these horror stories of ex-girlfriends who are now hearing from an old boyfriend. You just have to really evaluate, because there is a caveat in step 9 that says, if it's going to do more damage and harm, certainly don't be doing that kind of work, right?
Right.
Don't reach out to those people. And I believe that somebody really ought to evaluate that fairly close and say, that is just not a relationship, A, that my wife is going to be comfortable with me reaching out to.
Sure.
And B, and so it's going to do some damage to my wife. It's going to do some damage to myself. It's going to do some damage to the person that I'm reaching out to if it ended badly. I mean, there's just so many reasons why not reaching out to that person makes complete sense.
You certainly have to be willing to make the amends.
Yes.
And maybe there can be some
Which
work
is the
done.
step 8 area.
Right. And maybe there's some work to be done, like you could write down what it is you would say
Yeah.
if you needed to. But I think he's mostly focusing on his
I think you're right.
his
on
primary
wife.
relationship, right?
Yeah. I do believe, though, that this is something to sit down with his sponsor and actually spend some time with, working through those relationships and say, this makes sense, this one doesn't.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and even working, how do I make amends to my spouse?
Sure.
Speak to your therapist.
Sure.
Or maybe you come in a session. There's
Speak
been
to
several
your-
sessions with the therapist.
Yeah.
You planned what you're going to say, and then you have a session with the two of you, so the therapist can be there to guide you through it, and then help her, because she's going to have emotions coming up,
Right.
as well as you are, to kind of keep you guys grounded and in the moment.
I actually have put down a couple of thoughts as well. Some of the things that have been most incredibly helpful for us is, first of all, there's no doubt about it that my wife benefits from a therapist. I'm certain that each of yours does as well, and that I'm okay paying for that. I recognize that I've caused some damage here, and I'm okay, making certain that she gets the help that she needs. That's a priority for me, because there's no doubt about it. She developed a crazy to deal with my crazy, right? And so recognizing the fact that I've done some damage here, I'm willing to do whatever I have to do to help her work through those issues. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it's okay to get some couples therapy. It's one thing for you to have some therapy. It's okay for her to have some therapy, and then it's okay for us to have some therapy, because it's important that they come back together at some point in time and recognize that, ouch, there's been some pain and suffering here, and now how do we move forward in a meaningful way? Again, these things take time. This isn't something that This isn't going to be done by tomorrow kind of
Right.
stuff. Any other thoughts?
Let me have another look at this email real quick. What mistakes? What worked? Being open and honest and complete, and then giving yourself the room to do better when you know better.
Right.
In fact, I remember a lot of times I would be talking to my wife and I would tell her something that had happened or that I was dealing with. And her response was so not what I expected. I didn't think she understood what I said.
Sure.
So I would repeat myself, because her response just didn't fit with what my expectation was. I thought she'd be
get what I said.
yeah. No, let me state that again so that I make sure that she says, no, I understood. And so, but she would humor me sometimes and I would repeat it. And she goes, no, I understood. And it was really hard. So
It's a hard step and it's hard work.
I
Right.
can't tell you the number of times I did that.
yeah, but you know what? You have to allow room for the person to respond in the way that they're going to respond.
Yeah.
In this particular situation, I anticipated that she would respond badly and that she would get angry or upset. And so then when she didn't, I found it confusing.
Yes.
A better way to handle that would have been to go in and talk about it open and honestly and, make sure that I was clear, but give her the room to respond the way that she was going to respond and not have the expectation of a specific result.
Right.
Because you're going to think that you've got this well-crafted apology and all of this stuff and there's going to be a part of you that wants it to be received and reciprocated, and it might not be.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really important to understand. I think sometimes when we come into this step specifically, we assume that whatever thing that we've decided we're going to do is going to somehow make this all go away.
Right.
We have to be completely comfortable with the fact that there are some broken things that are unmendable. We have to be okay with that. We just simply do. There's no magical words that are going to come out of our mouth. There's no money we can pull out of our wallet. There's nothing that we can give that's going to fix everything. There just isn't. And so we have to be okay with the fact that, look, you made your very best effort to, you thought this through, you talked it over with a sponsor, you decided this is how you're going to approach making that amends, and you're going to do that particular thing. But there literally is unmendable things in this life. There just simply is. And some of this stuff is going to take a tremendous amount of time. My wife and I are just, after 7 years of this, really just now reaching some places where we can move forward in a little bit more meaningful way. But it's been a long haul. And she's, we're nowhere near where we'd like to be. So there's lots and lots of work still to be done. This is a long haul, and we're in it for the long haul. So I just don't believe that. I hope that whatever it is that we've decided is our amends, that we realize that may be completely insufficient. Saying I'm sorry doesn't necessarily heal everything.
Right. Another thing to consider is the right time and the right place.
Absolutely.
And you don't always get to know what that is.
Or control it.
No matter how well you prepare for it. I mean, you might say something or try to make amends to a person and it doesn't go well.
Right.
But that might sit with them, and then years later they might be ready to receive that.
Exactly.
Exactly. So the piece of that is you can't really close the door on it either. You remember your step 8 work, you have to be willing.
Right.
So if the time comes later down the road that this person has now maybe done some of their own work or some of their own maturity, is now ready to receive that or to have that conversation. Remember, part of your step work is that you need to be willing and ready to do that.
That's right.
That's
right. Yeah. Yeah, there are some pieces of this that literally only a higher power can resolve.
Sure.
And so,
and you've got to be willing to surrender that and turn it over to him when you've done everything that you can do. You have to turn it over to God.
say I've done my piece.
I've done the very best I can, and I'm willing to do more if
correct.
that comes down the road.
Yeah.
Correct.
And then you can find some peace with that.
Yeah, I think that's a critical component. Great suggestion. Well, I'm thrilled for him, Jay. I can't be more honest than that. I'm absolutely thrilled that you're at this place. That SAA has been helpful to you. The steps have been helpful to you. it's brought you to this place that says, I need to be working this stuff. I need to be making amends with those that I've done. I've done a significant amount of damage.
Right.
And so that's a great place to be.
Take some. You're doing fantastic, and I like that you can start to see the benefits of it. And I think your desire is there to continue to do work. But really listen to Daniel's advice at the end of the podcast when he says, find that humility and realize that
Correct.
you've got to keep yourself in a place to be willing to do the work that might come, and then also be willing to accept the time frame.
Yes.
Because you don't get to control that.
Right. Here's another piece of this too, is that he may be just laying the groundwork today in his step 9, only to be addressed, someplace down the road. This is an ongoing process. This isn't one and done for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
heavy
he may
lift.
find that someone comes out of the blue and he's got to go back through this process.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
There are significant people in my life that it took them years after finding out what happened before they were in a place that they were healthy enough to give me the opportunity to do that.
Right.
Yep.
And some of those were some pretty significant relationships that I wanted to maintain, siblings and such. So
And the same thing may apply to his wife.
Sure.
She just may not be in a place yet, and
Or
you don't want
kids.
to, and you don't want to rush that.
Correct. Interestingly enough, our marriage counselor is actually taking us back through some of this stuff. She gets to share with me the effect of what had happened. I in turn have a response, and so we're working through this even now 7 years down the road, as though it's like first disclosure kind of stuff. And I have to write a letter of how I intend to make amends. Mm-hmm. And so here we are at 7 years, even after all the disclosure and everything else that's gone on. We're finally at this place in our life where this makes some sense for us. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and realize that the amend, you can't make it up. So you're amending, you're making a change. And that can be a commitment. That can be a lifelong commitment for the rest of my life.
That's
or
right.
the rest of the time that we're together. This is
what it means.
This is what it means. And then that's an ongoing thing that has to be maintained.
Which is interesting because he started his email off with, I had another relapse, which, as you start thinking about the consequence of amend and that this is a lifelong thing, what does that really look like in terms of in the future where we say, hey, everybody's got one more relapse in them. The question is, do they have another recovery in it?
Right.
And do we have a spouse or a significant other or anyone that we've made these amends to that is willing to go through that another time? So
he's definitely fortunate. I didn't have that opportunity. But, the one thing I do want to say positive of this is, despite the fact he's had a relapse, it motivated him to get back.
It did.
Sure.
And instead of saying like, oh, I'm back at ground zero, he's like, no, I slipped back a little bit, but I know where to go to get help, and I know how to make the steps forward.
That's
so
recovery.
That's a good one. And
That's recovery right there, which is phenomenal. So congratulations, Jay. Well, I what a fantastic topic. What a fantastic email. I appreciate, Jay, for you reaching out. We'll go ahead and close up. This is Mike saying, do the work necessary to find the peace that recovery can bring.
And this is Gary saying, do the next right thing.
And this is Daniel saying, find the humility in your recovery.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like this episode, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find us.
As a fellowship of recovering addicts, Sex Addicts Anonymous offers a message of hope to anyone who suffers from sex addiction. Check out saa-recovery.org.